I'm Jeff Cornwall, host of The Entrepreneurial Mind.
And I'm Chris Sloan, co-chair of the Emerging Companies practice at Baker Donelson.
And we're here to talk about entrepreneurship in Nashville.
Talkopolis, the social media TV network for your city.
So Chris, historically, it's always been a challenge with a startup getting financing, trying to figure out valuation, trying to figure out the financing mechanisms that are in place. And convertible debt had kind of settled in as sort of the standard approach. And we're hearing more now about things like convertible equity and this thing called SAFE. Can you talk a little bit about all three of those mechanisms and the pros and the cons and what they do?
Sure. So convertible debt was a mechanism that was developed for smaller investment rounds and for rounds primarily that are led by people who aren't experienced investors, because one of the benefits of convertible debt is that it ducks the whole valuation issue until the next round of investors. Convertible debt is debt. It's a promissory note. There's an interest rate associated with it. And the idea is that it simply stays on the books of the company as debt until they raise their next equity round, and then it converts into that equity round essentially on the same terms as those later investors. So it's an easy, quick, and cheap way to raise money.
Is there any disadvantage to that for the entrepreneur?
The main disadvantage for the entrepreneur is that it is on the books of the company as debt, right? So it shows up on the financial statements, at least until there's a later equity round. And that is what has led to the development of these two new sort of alternative structures. One is called convertible equity. It's been around for probably 2 years or so. And the other is very recent, called SAFE, which just was posted by Y Combinator in the last few weeks, and it's been a hot topic of discussion both nationally and locally. It's certainly something I've been asked about a lot. But they are both geared around the notion that you can have the best of both worlds. You can have an investment on terms that don't require an agreed valuation that will then convert into equity in a preferred stock in the next traditional equity round, but they don't go on the books of the company as debt. Convertible equity is a type of stock that you create for the company that doesn't correlate to a particular percentage interest. So it's an equity ownership that really sort of is like a debt type security.
So it's a placeholder equity position,
that's a good
basically
way to think about it. And otherwise, the terms typically mirror convertible debt. The SAFE structure that YCOM posted about recently is similar, except it's really accomplished through a relatively simple set of contracts that just sort of create an obligation on the part of the company to convert that money into equity when they later have a financing round. So they have some similar features, some differences in how they're implemented. I think they're both interesting structures. They're new to investors nationally, and certainly in this market, investors tend to I don't want to say lag behind. They tend to be more conservative about newer structures. And I guess the better way to say it is that the trends in investing on the West Coast and to a certain extent on the East Coast usually take a little bit longer to filter into the investors in the Southeast. So I haven't seen any of those structures used here. I've had questions about it in the last couple years. I wouldn't be surprised to see them. In general, I think they work very well for the company. The more entrepreneurial investors will be fine with them. The more conservative investors are going to look at it and think, well, there's a benefit that goes along with the detriment to the company. There's a benefit to the investor, which is, I do have debt on the books, and if the company does poorly, debt gets paid before equity. So,
as if there's actually going to be something at that point.
Right, which is that's why the more enterprising investors generally are comfortable with it because they think of it as a win-win for both parties, and they're comfortable with the fact that if the company doesn't work, they're going to lose their money anyway.
Now, anytime there's a new structure like this, sort of the rules that are accepted by regulators and by the IRS are always kind of in play. Does that come into course here? I remember when the LLCs came out, some people cautioned a lot of us not to jump right in because the case law hadn't been written yet,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of interpretations yet to come.
Yeah, on the convertible equity structure, I don't think there's a lot of cause for concern. I think, my opinion only, there's somewhat of an open question as to whether it would really be treated as equity or debt in a bankruptcy proceeding, but that rarely happens with startups. They usually just sort of die and wither up and go away.
Right.
But generally speaking, I don't think there's a lot of issues there. The SAFE structure, is so new that some of these questions are still coming up, and I think there are some questions about different aspects of it. But it's been well vetted and put together by some very experienced attorneys and investors in Silicon Valley and out west. So I'm fairly confident that if those kinks haven't been worked out already, they probably will be fairly soon.
And do you see any problems at all with a company that might want to pursue that here right now, or do you think there's enough been resolved where you would counsel them go ahead and take a look at this?
I think the problem with doing it here is just the pragmatic problem of investors here are, on the whole, going to be pretty unfamiliar with these structures and likely to be much more comfortable with a traditional debt, convertible debt or equity structure. I think other than that, no.
And they're going to probably set the structure anyway.
Right.
Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, happy to be here. If you want more information on the SAFE structure or the convertible equity structure, we've provided links with basic information for you.